Hello, young math Padawans. It's Mrs. Angel with your lesson for today on multiplying fractions and integers. Now, what does this mean? We're looking at products where we're taking a fraction of a number. And there's a long way to do this, and then there's a short way to do this. We're going to start with the long way that you were probably taught in your previous classes, and then we're going to try to do a shorter way where we use our mental math to be able to do some division rather than just multiplication. So grab these notes and let's get started. Let's start with the long way. So what you were probably taught to do is when you have a fraction times an integer, you were taught to change that integer into a fraction by putting it over 1. Now that we just have a product of two fractions, we can multiply straight across. 1 times 18 is 18, and 3 times 1 is 3. But 18 thirds, that can be simplified. So now we have to go through the process of simplifying. That's 3 times 6 over 3 times 1 to make that big one factor of 3 thirds, and we end up with 6 over 1, or just 6. There's nothing wrong with this method, but imagine this is just one step in a multi-step problem. I feel like it would be easier to do this math mentally. So before I show you the short way, go ahead and use the long way to simplify number 2 and number 3. Let's see how you did. For number 2, 20 over 1 times 1/5 is 20/5, which after factoring out a big 1 leaves you with 4 over 1, or just 4. In number 3, you may have struggled because it was a negative, but I always like to say when you're dealing with negatives, put the negative in the numerator. Let me show you what that looks like. So if I have negative 1/4, just put that negative in the numerator to show that we're dealing with negative 1/4 as opposed to 1 - 4, which doesn't really make much sense. So negative in the numerator, multiply straight across, gives you negative 16/4, and after factoring out a big 1, we have negative 4. Although there's nothing wrong with this method, I would rather have a method that I can do mentally in my head with quotients rather than having to do all of this work with fractions and simplifying. So let's look at the same 3 problems, but this time doing it a shorter way. Let's start with number 1. The first step that I want you to think about is that when you're dealing with a fraction, you're dealing with a combination of both multiplication and division. Remember when we used to look at quotients. If I had 6 thirds, that's the same as 6 divided by 3. So this operation here, this fraction bar, means division. So what's happening here is there's multiplication happening in the numerator and division happening from the numerator to denominator. So I want you to think about this as a combination of multiplying and dividing. So here's our first step. We're going to move the multiplication into the numerator. So we're going to rewrite this as 1 times 18 divided by 3. It's the same kind of step as what we were doing before, just without the over 1. Now here's the cool part. We've now shown there is a quotient here. If you look carefully, we have 18 divided by 3 as a quotient. And what is 18 divided by 3? That's just 6. So really, this becomes 1 times 6. And what's 1 times 6? 6. So let's compare this method to the one we did before. A lot of the math is still the same. You're still doing multiplication, and you're still eventually really doing division, but now we're doing it all in one step and part of it in our heads. The multiplication goes in the numerator, then we can simplify the quotient and simplify the product that's left behind. Let's take a look at number 2. So we're going to start by putting our multiplication in the numerator. That's going to be 20 times 1 divided by 5. Now here's the cool part. Where's the quotient? I see it right here, 20 divided by 5. 20/5 is the same math as 20 divided by 5. And what is 20 divided by 5? That's just 4. So we're left with 4 times 1 as opposed to 20 divided by 5 times 1. See how I still have a product left over, but now that quotient piece has been simplified. And 4 times 1 is 4. Let's take a look at our last example. All right, step 1, move that multiplication into the numerator. But careful, there's a pre-step here. That negative also goes in the numerator. So this would be negative 1 times 16 divided by 4. There we go. And we do have a quotient that we can simplify, 16 divided by 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So this becomes negative 1 times 4. So again, all we did was simplify that quotient, and negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. Notice again, I didn't have to do any type of simplifying fractions. I'm just looking at this as an equivalent product and quotient. So let's try this shorter way on a couple more examples. I'll do 4, 5, and 6, and then you'll do 7, 8, and 9. Let's start with number 4. Step 1, multiplication in the numerator. So this is 2 times 18 divided by 3. Where's the quotient? 18 divided by 3 is the quotient, because we can't divide 2 by 3 evenly. However, we can divide 18 by 3 evenly. And what's 18 divided by 3? That would be 6. So this is now 2 times 6 instead of 2 times 18 divided by 3. And 2 times 6 is 12. So 2/3 times 18 is 12, or 12 is 2/3 of 18. Let's take a look at number 5. Step 1, move that multiplication into the numerator. 20 times 4 divided by 5. What part is the quotient here? Well, we can't divide 4 by 5 evenly, but we can divide 20 by 5. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So this becomes 4 times 4. We're just simplifying that part of the quotient. And 4 times 4 is, you guessed it, 16. So 20 times 4/5 is 16. Or you could say 16 is 4/5 of 20. Last example, and it has a negative. So the first thing I'm going to do is put that negative in the numerator. So I have negative 3 times 16 divided by 4. Where's the quotient here? That would be 16 divided by 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4, so this simplifies to negative 3 times 4. Notice that I'm not forgetting about the fact that we're still multiplying by negative 3. You could also write this as negative 3 times 16 divided by 4 if that would help you see it a little bit better. Either way, negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. So negative 3/4 times 16 is negative 12, or you could say negative 12 is negative 3/4 of 16. Now that you've seen a few, it's your turn to try a few. Go ahead and simplify 7, 8, and 9 now. Check your answers to 7, 8, and 9. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them on the next question screen.